Hello, everyone. Let's give a couple minutes for Andrea because I know he's back and it's been a few weeks since he's been here, so I'd like to give him the opportunity. I might message him, see if he's joining. All right. I don't know if he's gonna join, so we can go ahead and get started. Give me one sec while I clean my screen of all the stuff. Da, da, da. All right. Screen. I'll be right back. I have to quit Zoom and rejoin, open it. One sec. All right, now I should be able to share my screen. There we go. Okay, so, all right, so here are the sig notes. And then today is May 5th. Copy this. Oh, come on.
Are you sharing?
It says I am. Do you not see it?
I see.
Oh, you see it. Okay, okay. Just making sure. Do you see it? Did he see? Oh, you're muted. Did he see?
I'm missing one of my windows, and so I'm just trying to figure out where it is
Oh,
in
where
my.
it went.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. All right, so May 5th. Copy the agenda real quick. Mm. All right. So I think the big thing that came out of last week was DC's issue, which was uh Wisdom inspired. So let's go there. Oh, there it is. So this is the namespace proposal. All right. Let me know when you have your screen up, when you're able to see DDC. That way we can start going
I can
through it. I
see.
don't. Oh, you can
Yeah.
see? Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm going to increase the screen size. I know my resolution is quite large. So I definitely like this. Before, when custom data was first like, or when I first discussed custom data with Andrea, I remember him just kind of talking about, anything can go in there, and then, the idea of like my first use case wasn't companies, but I was just worried about toolings colliding with custom data, but it's kind of this in the same vein. And this answers that, like solves that problem. So I think this is definitely something that we will need to look at in the future and kind of think about how we want to figure out namespacing, which I think this proposal is going to answer. So let's kind of dive into it a little bit. So did you want to give any highlights, or do you just want me to kind of go over like some of the details to DC?
I would start by just adding that this is really centered around interoperability, not so much because there were some really good questions at the bottom. I haven't answered them yet because I figured some more questions were coming in. But that's the main goal. And so things like the base event is like the part of the declaration to say that this is the basic unit of a CD event, so people can create net new events and have a way to inherit from something as a
Yeah.
net new CD event. But that was also part of the problems that this trying to solve is like one, as we're adding different types of tools, let's say we start to move into like data ops or ML ops toolings that still follow like CI/CD, we need to be able to introduce those tools with a pattern
Yes.
that helps people, map to what a CD event is and what the base expectation is. And then from there, we can have an inheritance cycle from that. So that's where the idea of base event came from. There was, of course, the mention of not using my original didn't have the schema URI in it. So I made that switch to the schema URI. But like I said, I will, after this, go through all of the comments and then address them all specifically. And there's one more proposal that comes after this one, which is the workflow segment. And I didn't quite finish that this morning. I need maybe another 15, 20 minutes before I'll post that one. But then that ties into this as well as bringing it full circle where not only do we have the namespacing, but then why all of this matters from an interoperability standpoint for an IDP.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad like, Andrea is on board with base event. I don't understand. Okay, so I understand an empty base event. Like in compiler theory, like if you're following like an inheritance paradigm, like you need like an empty base event, right? Or
Yeah,
you have to like do that magically. So I think this makes much more sense to have it. It actually makes the language a lot simpler. So I understand from a compiler theory point of view why this makes sense. I think we might have to, unless you already explained it. Oh, no, no. Okay.
no, I
Yeah, we
haven't
might have to
answered
kind of
any questions yet. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We might have to come at it from like a compiler theory, answer, or maybe not. You're
Well,
better at
yeah,
answering questions than
and
I
that's just
am.
the
So
point, right?
yeah.
That's why I was saying it's about interoperability, and this is like the DSL side of the IDPs, and
Right,
that
right.
you're going to have to inherit the object from something, so that
Exactly.
systems that are consuming this and having a DSL
Hmm.
around it can have a place to start, just like you said with compiler theory. Um, yeah, because without a place to start, then we don't know what an event basically is, right? So
Yeah,
somebody has
yeah.
to read about
And
it.
worst case, someone could just forget their base event, and then
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, is this an empty base event, right? So like this makes total sense to me. So
Right. And
um
it is the place to start when there's no place to start, right? Because you have
exactly,
to like
yeah.
say, okay, is this actually a CD event? And that becomes a part of that discussion when somebody submits something. We can say it's not a CD event because you're missing blah, blah, blah. And then, give them a place to start.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, okay, so let's
David,
kind
does that
of
make sense? Or am I just shooting?
no, no, no. From my
Oh, I'm
perspective, I
sorry.
think this makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. But I know, from we have a lot of context here, Denise.
Right,
So,
exactly.
so
That's why I was
David,
asking you
does
like
this
David. Yeah.
yeah, does this make sense for you? Like what the idea is and what it's trying to shoot for?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, because when I try to create when I work on the maybe future SDK generation, I start with this base event where I say what the context is the command part mainly, and when we implement um, SDK, it's often what we are doing. Where I have more doubts, it's about the way we want to do it, because today it's one of the issue is we have one versioning and one event and one schema per event type per event so we have a multiple JSON event. And in the end, when we use SDK generator, etc., we have multiple implementation of context, etc., because we generate, and it's why we create, at least for Rust, I create this custom generator that where I have part that is uncoded and parts that are generated from the multiple JSON schema. And when we try to solve with this, with the other work, and being able to add more schema, I understand the purpose, and for the base events, it's exactly what I try to do for implementation and for the new one. So I'm fully agree with this. It's just the approach, and if JSON schema is the right tool, and if we want to continue to have one version per artifact predicate.
Yeah, you would still have one version per artifact predicate, right?
Yes, we have one version per event, and an event is for one artifact plus predicate. So it means if you have 3 predicates, you have 3 schema today. So if you want to generate, you cannot generate automatically a SDK just for the 3 predicate, by example, for services. And it's also why we try to create those SDK that try to merge everything.
Okay, maybe I'm not following with why this prohibits that. I guess that's because it sounds like you're doing the thing because you're going to start with something. This is okay. This is the common structure of an event. All I'm looking for here is something to be able to tell users this is the common structure for an event, and these are the things that you must have to be a CD event, which for any validator would be the place to start with the base validation of is this a CD event, and then start to evaluate the fields that are in that context, right? So if it was a new predicate or subject predicate combination, that work to do the validation based on the JSON schema overall is still there, and it would still be a single JSON schema.
It's a single JSON schema for one predicate. But if you want, by example, just validate everything related to a service, it's 4 predicates.
Right, so it would still be 4 predicates. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't change the fact that I'm not trying to change that portion of it.
Yes, but it's 4 predicates, and if it's runtime validation for the consumer part, I took. If it's runtime validation, it means we download and we cache the 4 JSON schema. Maybe more if we support multiple versions of its schema, of its predicate.
Oh, but we do that now, right? We have to support the multiple versions now if we have multiple versions.
But we don't, all SDK doesn't support multiple version. Some SDK just support spec 0.3, by example, or 0.5, or 0.4.
Right, but again, you're saying different. Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is there are multiple validators that each support a different version, but that's still us supporting multiple versions.
Yeah. Can you repeat, please?
Like you said that to make the clients, you have to do one for, they're version specific clients, but there are multiple clients that we have for those versions, right? And so if there's a version 2, .2, the SDK supported .2, but that's the .2 version of the SDK. Then there was a .3, and then there was a .4. But each one of those may be completely separate, but we're still supporting multiple versions. Does that make sense?
Yes. I don't talk for every SDK. The Rust SDK is compiled by examples. We generate data binding for version 0.3 and 0.4. And also internally for master. But we don't publish the code for master.
Right, and this is not so much for the the clients themselves, but to accomplish interoperability on the other end for the consuming systems.
Yes,
right?
but for consuming, I need to be able not just to validate, but also to know where are the information. I mean, when we rename a field, if I could, the consumer could say, the incoming message could be fully validated by the JSON schema, it's valid. But if the data binding itself doesn't work, I will not be able to read the field because the field was renamed, by examples.
Well, you can't rename fields. That's part of the spec, right? Any field that exists has to always be there. So anything that we put
today, today I opened several tickets because we have a lot of inconsistency, and part of the 0.5, by example, we have some breaking change and we rename some field.
Yep. No, that's still. I'm not talking about that CDEvents does. CDEvents can have as many breaking changes as we want because we're the group that has CDEvents, and we are basically the authority of what a CD event is. And it doesn't preclude us from making breaking changes. It just says that anyone who's using the namespacing proposal and adding extra data to an event can only add extra data to the event because whatever we say 0.5 is what 0.5 actually is. And if you'd want to support and consume, a 0.5 CD event, regardless of the tool, it's always going to look the same way. So even if you've added extra data to it, and extra data fields, even if the tool is completely unaware of that, it would still be able to interact with it like it's a CD event. And the goal here, again, is interoperability. So it's just setting an expectation that even if I don't know about your extra data, because regardless of how we do this, whoever is, doing the actual work to integrate into an IDP or do a custom workflow, they're going to still be doing the integration work. But we just want the system itself to respect what's coming with the from the CDEvent side of it. And the next proposal where we introduce the workflow segments that actually makes the interoperability possible, that should kind of clear up some of the context about how we're expecting this whole thing to work. But before we could introduce that, we needed the namespacing to be able to say, hey, Jenkins can do something separate from Circle CI, but they both have to have a pattern that's interoperable, right? Or, Apple could do something different from JP Morgan Chase, but they would still be following a pattern that's CDEvents. And so as a new tool starts to consume it, or as an IDP, you're doing your IDP work and your integration work, that you don't lose that work regardless of what the tool is. And so that's the goal for interoperability. Like, how do I keep my workflow orchestrator the same if I change out tools underneath it that use CDEvents?
And
Yes,
to be clear, David, like this namespace proposal is like completely additive for the clients, right? So like it shouldn't break anything technically. Right. Like how it's worded, it's completely additive. So I'm a little confused on what you're getting at. I wonder if it's just like I think the scope of the proposal is just kind of like set an expectation of rules for people to follow, for tools to follow, for services to follow. And what
I think there is maybe two topics in this ticket, because there is the topic of new events and adding stuff to enhancing existing events with more information that should go through the full pipeline like a black box, unhandled by tools that don't understanding, but they should pass through the full pipeline. Sorry. And it's what I would like just to say. Today, SDK only support data that should come through only via custom data. So it's also why I have this question. Is it this proposal relating to custom data? Because before there is a section related to custom data for routing in the examples, or is it to add field inside existing existing service or existing subject.
It doesn't preclude you from doing that. It's encouraging you to use custom data to do, completely custom things, of course. But if a team wanted to add things to subject or context, they should still be able to do that without breaking CD events. And that's why the fields that we say have to be there, the required fields, are going to be there unchanged. Like you can't change what we say is the CD event, 05. None of those fields can be changed by the person who is creating their own event. They can either add new fields or added their information to custom data.
So just about adding new fields.
Yeah.
Today, it means to go through, technically to go through every JSON event and change a flag, because additional field is set to false in every JSON schema today. So today we doesn't support additional fields. So it means also that when we are doing binding or SDK.
So how do people use custom data if it doesn't support additional fields?
No, custom data is managed as a string or a black box JSON structure. But additional field inside the subject or predicate, it's not allowed. It's what I say.
Okay.
It just there is the two section. It's why on the discussion I ask if this namespacing is for inside subject or for
no, the namespacing is for inside custom data.
Okay. So in this case, yes, I have no. It's a good approach to have. Yes, we need namespacing. To be honest, I think something similar, but not based on WSDL, because SOAP for me is an horrible spec to implement and to work with, but more
I'm old, man.
more
like
OpenGL extension. But OpenGL extension have the same issue, or CSS extension have the same issue at sometimes. It's when an extension become part of the standard, how we promote it to the standard, how customer have to handle, hey, do I support this extension and the new value, etc. But we have all the same problem for OpenGL, for CSS, for everything in terms of extension.
I wouldn't use OpenGL as a bar. Like that library is very, very old, and so like the design patterns are also very, very old. Like Vulkan has a much better library, and it handles extensions fairly well. So I think, like I said, if you go back, to any library, right, that wasn't designed with extensibility or dependency injection in mind, you're going to run into this issue. However, when we hopefully as CDEvents, create libraries, create SDKs, we always have to think about extensions in mind. How can people extend events? How can people extend the SDK, right? With very little friction. So I think that those are always important considerations whenever we're designing any sort of library and framework. And so, and like I said, I would refrain from using like OpenGL as I mean, like I said, still really good library and whatnot, but like I said, it's a little old, and so they're getting the legacy like.
No, I mentioned OpenGL because there are a lot of vendor try
specific, yeah.
Yes, and they use process to promote exactly like CSS with Mozilla Firefox, Chrome, etc. My question next: if the proposal is just for the custom data section, why using a new? Why do we need schema URI or something, or not just maybe a subfield of custom data or another field?
Because it's the users, and you actually made this point in the beginning of your discussion or explanation, David, is that if the user wants to add subject or context fields that they absolutely feel that they have to do, like right now, it's set to no custom fields, like all of those fields have to be there. but no extra fields can be there. I think it allows them to say, no, I don't want to use that as my base. I want to add fields, and pick their own schema so that they can have their own custom schema that's beyond just the namespacing. Um, and it also lets people introduce new tools to uh, our ecosystem on their own without having to go through the hassle of coming to us and say, hey, I have this experimental thing I want to do. They can start experimenting with their own concepts, because they just need to inherit from the base event, and the system itself will recognize it as a CD event. I think that's still the major uh, ask out of this, is that we give users the flexibility to build their own SDKs and based on their own schema. And so that we can say, hey, when you're building out your SDK, this is how you point it at your own schema. This is how you generate your own SDK, according to your own needs. And so that what they're doing is building an SDK that respects CD events overall, and also lets them add whatever they want to do to their own space.
So next questions. It means that you can, in the custom data, we can implement only one namespace.
No, actually, you could implement several namespaces. That's why they're
How?
namespaced.
But if you define only one schema,
Uh-huh.
it means one schema for one namespace.
No. It's not one schema, one namespace. That is interesting. That's what you're taking out of it. Yeah, there's no limit on the number of namespaces that you can have. The issue would be the consumer would have to be aware of all of those namespaces to get that data back out, right? The consumer itself is the system that needs to be aware of the namespace, but the emitter can emit to as many namespaces as it needs to. Generally, it's only going to be one because it's going to be either tool specific, but you may have cases where, again, like Apple might have their own version of what Jenkins is doing, right? And so instead of inheriting from the 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 base event, they might actually be doing it based on a Jenkins specific event that adds extra namespace fields, and then they would have the Apple namespace and the
So it means that for every namespace that we want to use,
mhm.
we have to create some kind of lineage where we have A, then A plus B, then A plus B plus C, and I have, I'm sorry, and when I create C, I have to see C is based on A plus B. It's not
Sure.
like, but because my question is why, it's based on W, on XML, to simplify, XML namespaces. In XML namespaces, you declare every namespace that you in the top descriptor, and you say this namespace use this schema, this namespace use this schema. Why here we don't do the same if it's based on the same? What not saying extension additional namespace I would like to append instead of having to create all the to stack them and not to compose them. Today in the description we declare only one namespace. Because we say it is this one based on this other one, but we could keep my question is, we could keep the type as it is today, but just have a list of namespace of additional namespace that should be applied only for the custom data, by example, or for other field.
Sure. And I think that's where I'm thinking that the interoperability proposal will clear some of this up, because it's the way that we've thought through this is only for the SDLC orchestrators. Well, no, primarily for the SDLC orchestrators, the system that is the consumer and router for the CDEvents interoperability, because interoperability for CDEvents has to be orchestrated. There's no way to you know, to enforce it across tools without something guiding and making sure that those events show up when they're supposed to. Because part of the problem with interoperability through eventing is that it's unreliable, right? And so you need something that understands what the entire graph is up front. And because you're saying to the system, hey, this is the entire graph, you can also say for these sections, apply this plugin. That has to do with the namespacing.
Okay, so once again, I have to wait for the next proposal.
Right, and that's and unfortunately, yeah, I need about another half an hour to finish it.
No, no issue.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying. But that is the concept that we were trying to the problem we were trying to solve for is how do we make an orchestrator that is tool agnostic that can manage an entire SDLC workflow regardless of what tools you use. And so if you're using Circle CI or if you're using TeamCity or if you're using Jenkins or Tecton, the expectation is always the same from a CD events perspective. And so that the tools under this orchestrator can be the orchestrator itself is tool agnostic. So it doesn't matter which tool you put underneath it, you'll still get the same, experience using the workflow orchestrator. And then any business logic that you write with the workflow orchestrator, you don't have to change if you change between Jenkins and Tecton, right? All of that work that you've done is preserved because it's based on the interoperability of CD events, not a specific tool. And so a major portion of what we're going for is how do we make a tool agnostic IDP, and so that large corporations and small corporations can both get the benefit of being able to swap out tools without losing the work that they've done to date for integration with the rest of their systems.
Difficult goals, in my opinion, because at some points we have to know what is the data. It's the same issue with container and composition.
Yeah,
you can create collection, but it means
Yeah.
that the collection don't care about the content, but at some point you have to work with the items. Yes, well, let's see about, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's pretty straightforward. I mean,
just to also, because those schema, another concern I have regarding what you say is how the schema URI will be built, because there is no inheritance in JSON schema, no polymorphisms. It's also why we are looking for something else. But there is the concept of all off, and they try to mix, and you can override, and there are some rules to mix, but it's a lot of validator and generator doesn't support it well, to be honest, from my test at least. Or they generate warning and say, I will ignore this part, etc. I have conflict when I try to merge. So it's something that will be maybe hard to enforce. Examples of what we have today, it means that on the schema URI, on the samples at the screen, it means that we should check that CI change created internally inherit or merge the schema URI from the base event.
Yeah.
So it should be able. So it's also a lot of what I would like to say. It's implementations and rules how to manage this schema that is not standard, and that we have to start to be clear how we will manage those schema, etc. Because it's not in default.
No, you're absolutely right. That is literally why I started that. Actually, why we started that from like a base event. That is the CD event, so that it would have the subject and the context, and whatever we say are the fields that must be there in every subject and context, so that we do have this starting point, right? And then for all of the CD event definitions for CD events, those absolutely have to be respected. And it's not going to be an enforcement issue. What will happen is people will try to use the interoperability. They will have made a change outside of, how that system works, and their whole thing will break because they didn't respect it. And we won't have the enforcement issue so much as being sure that they follow the model, and we can point at it and say, hey, look, you can't change anything about the base, about the CD events that we declare as CD events, not just the base event, but whatever we say is pipeline start. You always have to have these fields for pipeline start because CD events defines that. What you're doing is building something on top of that, and that's allowed. So as long as you respect the system that we put in place, then that interoperability will move forward with you.
So it looks more and more like defining an envelope, I could say, and
Yeah.
a blob inside and a blob inside.
No, it does. It's basically turning CD events into TCP/IP, right? Where you basically want to say, I just want to address and know where this is going to be in this workflow, and I also expect these data to be in this spot, encapsulated in this way. And that's the expectation we're matching, because what we're trying to do is map this to a DSL before we actually do the work, right? Because the part of this is like, when we get this object, how do we consistently get the information out and have it be where we expect? And what other subsystems do I need to put in place to get the extra fields? And so that's where being able to declare the workflow in the actual SDLC workflow YAML says this is what the graph is going to be. And when you're pulling out this information, oh, by the way, use this plugin so I can get all of the extra information that I'm expecting. And it just to help you expose it programmatically. So that's really what we're mapping this to. But I could see how coming at it in the way that we are putting this into CD events without knowing that where we're going, it makes some of these seem a little bit strange. But to jump to the end and say, oh, this is our proposal for interoperability without having, put in a namespace proposal will, of course, make the other look weird, because we're going to hand it to you and it says, hey, we're expecting namespacing to be here for this to work, and this is why, but we need to have that proposal in first. And then the third piece that is after this one is this is the SDLC workflow orchestrator, which we are calling Conduit right now. I still think that's an awesome name, Ben. Great job. And
Is it the application defined on conduit.app?
No, I never even heard of conduit.app.
Because I did a search on Conduit, and I find these tools. That seems to be a workflow, also a tools to manage workflow.
Really? Has someone stole our idea?
It's an AI agent is what I'm coming up with.
Okay. All right.
So something completely different. Yeah.
Oh, wow. For real estate at that, huh?
Yep. Real estate.
Interesting. Yeah, no, this isn't it. We haven't even broken, ground on this because we haven't gotten all of the pieces in yet. But yeah, so when all of the pieces are in, that's when we will start the yeah, this is what it could be kind of discussion, and see if we can rally some companies to join us in the building of it. If not, we'll just do our thing. But yeah, I didn't know that Conduit was taken.
Well, I mean, yeah, naming is always like difficult, but like,
Yeah,
like,
no, Conduit stays, dude. I love that name. That's
yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, like worst case it could be CDEvents conduit, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly. No,
yeah,
yeah,
so it's like
no.
really easy. So
Yeah.
but yeah, and to give some clarity, David, so the DC has been like harping on this idea on me for like a couple of years now, since the beginning. And it took me like just like last week or 2 weeks ago to finally understand. I think it finally like clicked in my brain like what he was shooting for. So like I said, like it might not be obvious, but the one thing that I did that really helped me understand what DC was looking for, I had to actually take a step back from all the assumptions of CDEvents. So my issue is because I'm so stuck in the CDEvents like mentality. Like I'm always looking at through it from like a lens of like CDEvents, like the current events that we have. But this is actually like a idea that's built on top of CDEvents. So that's a better way of thinking about it, and that really helped me understand what was being what the end goal was. So I think when with the next proposal, keep that in mind, and I think it'll make a lot more sense.
Yeah, and I'm gonna Slack you something, David. And just this is the piece that hopefully you can let me know if you can open that. But
Okay, let me click on it.
I hope that was the right one. Yeah, I think it's the right one.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so this is what the next proposal is going to be based on. That will This is the segmenting concept that is what the orchestrators are going to be aware of, because with the segments, then you can do interoperability. Because what we're going to say is anytime we have a build, we're expecting these events in this order, which is why we want to preserve the what CDEvents defines them as, and then let people build on top of that. Because it really is more about being able to have some sort of SDLC workflow orchestrator see what the tools are doing and know prescriptively what the intent was. And so we figured out how to preload a bunch of intent. And if the orchestrator already knows that you're doing a deployment, then for the person who is interacting with this and we're using the DSL to write code, then every deployment you'll get the same information in the same places for being able to do things like show the workflow as one UI, or even building business logic around it for like approval gates and things like that, so that you can only so not that you can only, but so that you have the ability to preserve your code as you switch out tools. And that will help companies, of course, bring those tools in faster, experiment more. It's really how do we extend the latest features that are available in open source to a organization as quickly as possible, and how do we use CDEvents to make that happen, and showing the use cases and how you can use CDEvents to go beyond just observation of what you're doing.
Okay. In my case, because we are working on similar topics, I choose another approach. It's more like a reaction from CDEvents. It means that the event is sent to my evidence store. It's the name used in CDEvents. So to the evidence store, from where I can graph and extract some data, but it could also be sent to a workflow, existing workflow operator like N8N, Zapier, etc., to help integration.
Yeah.
To do the reaction, it's more a reaction system than an orchestrator.
Yeah,
Why?
That's what it's doing. I mean, it's an orchestrator in name, but it's basically is a reaction system, right? Because the one thing you can do with it that's orchestration related is you can say, okay, I was expecting an event and I didn't get that event. And so can I query that system and get the state of this pipeline? Did the pipeline fail? Did the pipeline, did it complete and it just didn't push the event? And so it's that little bit of extra that actually technically still, monitors and does the orchestration, but it's not trying to do anything prescriptive. It's letting the tools underneath actually do all of the work. It's just making sure that the steps you expect are going to happen. And it is reactive, right? Because then, of course, you can do things like have that business logic that has the approval gate, but that can still be callback driven, right? And so whatever the pipeline system is can just call the service that's in the main orchestrator or in the SDLC workflow orchestrator and say, hey, is this approved? Can I move forward? But because you only have to write and create that code once, then as you bring in new tools, you can easily extend that to the new tools. Or if you're in a very large corporation, you can then flatten how approval is done across the board if you wanted to. You're not required to in any way, shape, or form, and it doesn't remove the ability to do anything that you were doing before. It just gives you a place to be able to, or not just a place, it gives you a way to be able to swap out tools or have different teams do different things, but still have their workflow look exactly the same in an IDP.
Yes, maybe it's back on our expertise. One of the issues I add with this approach to
Mhm.
of the issue is in my previous company, we are doing some training of AI model, etc., etc. And we are running some tests that could take long time and
Mhm.
blocking an orchestrator that is waiting for an external job to run a training or a test. We have also a long tests are very long on some of them. It's blocking and consuming and cost money for nothing because the system is just waiting. So it's
Mhm.
why why I go to the more reactive approach. And the other one is that we have scheduled stuff, scanning image, scheduling, running test, a smoke test, etc. And they are not triggered by an event, by a workflow event, I would say. But we want to have the result and maybe react to the the test fails. But as you mentioned, we don't care in this approach to what's happened if the test didn't run.
Right.
That in the case of orchestrator we can handle because the orchestrator is aware of what is start and what should end.
Yep.
So to different use case.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but again, it doesn't, of course, and I think that's the flexibility. It doesn't keep you from operating like that, because we're not replacing CD events. We're actually trying to get more people to adopt it in the broadest
Yeah,
sense and always do exactly what CD events expects, so that regardless of all of the extra bits, any reactive system that you built will still continue to work.
yeah. Today's reactive part, it's not my focus. I focus on before reacting. I have to know what events and what happens.
Yes, but the added concept from, that we want to be able to add is like, let's have the graph up front, and then like you said, like we do Spinnaker, and sometimes people will run deployments for like 4 or 5 days, and so you'll have a pipeline that's running for 4 or 5 days, right, as part of someone's actual workflow. But if that's what's expected, it's fine for the orchestrator to, check periodically to see if this is finished or not. And that's not that expensive, but you're right, it does, you know, consume some resources, but it's also having the flexibility to know, oh, I was expecting this test to run, this test didn't run, be able to query that system programmatically and say, hey, this didn't run, what's the state of it, to get back whether or not there was a failure or is the test still running. And it's being able to capture that failure and then make a decision about what to do next, that you get from the orchestration side of what Conduit is, but you could run it completely reactive if you wanted to, and just, we're not removing any of that ability. We're just trying to support as much of those different types of use cases as we can by just setting up the intent of what you're doing at each step, so that there's a general understanding of a build does these steps, or a build and moving something to uh, Artifactory does XYZ steps. A build with a deployment does XYZ steps, or a deployment, canary deployments work this way, or, a rollback works this way. And being able to clearly define what's that expectation as a set of events then lets the system overall know what's going on, and then you can make it interoperable.
Great.
Right? So that's why it has concepts like change requests, review change requests, artifact storage, build deploy, build merge. These are like the definitions of what we're expecting to be produced and what events we're expecting to be produced for these segments. So if we get those events in that particular order, then the system can say, oh, okay, you did do your review change request because I got all of the events that I was expecting in this particular order, and it can query it at any time, especially if you get like you get a create and a merge and you don't get a review event, right? You want to go back and check the system and say, hey, did you actually do the review? So that you can go back and maybe have an annotated event, so that other systems that are relying on the change review event actually still get it. And so that's part of what the orchestration of this system lets you do too. It's also can be self-healing and ask questions about where you are in that process.
Yes, where you are in the process is also my goals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Oh, sorry,
and
Bo,
there's
go ahead.
wait, can you hear me? Okay, yeah. I was gonna say, there's also multiple ways to solve like the polling issue as well. So like,
Yeah.
like I said, there's multiple ways to skin this cat. There's multiple ways, like, and I think too, with when we start thinking about conduit, like, when we get to that phase, you know, we can definitely leverage what people's done in the past, and as well as, like our experience, like, at various companies, to ensure that we make something scalable. So yeah, I think, and then David, you said yourself, that you've learned some things implementing it, something similar on your end, so we could definitely take that and learn from that as well.
Yes. Off topic, if we are finished with that, I have one
Yeah, yeah,
question
yeah.
for you, Ben. Last time you mentioned that you will, in the past, you will ask if you can share some information about the link services you work on.
Oh, right. What? Yeah, because I took last week off actually, so I did have a chance to, uh,
One
to
month
to
ago, yes.
yeah, to work on it. But yeah, let me get some time to, because I have some slides that I did internally at Apple that I could probably just clean up and just reuse that to kind of give an idea of how links will work and kind of the idea of it. But yeah, let me add that to my calendar to like allocate some time to do that. So for next
Okay.
week.
No urgency. It's just if you have the opportunity, it's
Oh
fine.
yeah, definitely. I mean, like the sooner the better, because we definitely want to get all the SDKs support links. You being the maintainer of the Rust SDK, that we definitely want to get that in there as well. So yeah, I'll figure out a good time to do that. But yeah, I'll let you know, David, like maybe like a Friday before, like when it's ready, so that way, like on a Monday, we can make sure that you're there, or whoever's interested to be there to kind of learn about like kind of the vision of how this could work, and then like the
Yeah.
how.
So no urgency, because in May in France we have a lot of blank blank holidays. So I
Oh,
will take
okay,
some
okay.
time
No
off
worries,
this
no
year,
worries then. All right, all
and
right.
we do some
Well,
long weekends sometimes.
oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's also awesome too. But yeah. Just let me know when you're available then, and then we can kind of schedule around then. And then, like I said, I'll ping you on Friday when it's ready. And if you're off that week, or you won't be able to attend, we can always just move it too.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
cool. So I'll mention that too. Link slide demo link presentation. Name on here. All right, cool. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and do that. And I'll let you know, David. But yeah, so was there anything else? There's one thing I want to close with, because I think it's interesting, but if
I
not, we can move
Just
it
to
to next week.
mention,
Yeah.
I create today two tickets, but one is more important, is about the merge of subject source and subject ID. Yes, the top one. So if you have the opportunity to look at it, because I have managing source, it's not pain, but it's as it's optional. Sometimes it generates some issue. I don't know how to manage it, how to extract information for my current work and implementation, internal implementation. On our deployment, by examples, we move part of the source to the ID, etc. So my question is, can we remove source, I could say, and replace ID by URI, because it's a merge of source plus ID. So
Right.
it's a breaking change, but it's also for harmonization. I mean, the way artifacts, by example, are managed is the way it's the most easiest way to manage internal of application for me today. Today, I'm able to create a graph from publication to deployment into a service from an artifact because it's a single field. I have all the information I'm able to parse because it's a URI. We can add a query parameter, etc.
I'll have to think about it. I'm still in favor of keeping them separate because they do describe two very different things. But
the issue is that source, it's not clear what is it, because we say source, if source is not set, it should be default to the source of the context. But the source of the context is who generates the event, but not the source of the subject itself.
well, it's the source of the subject. So the subject would be the tool that it's referring to, right? So like for Jenkins,
Yes.
it would be like, the Jenkins like URL, or it'd be, GitHub, for example. So yeah, and then ID is like the literal, ID of the build or ID of the, etc. So like having them separate.
It could be more because ID is relative to the source. It should be unique only to the source. So if we use Jenkins,
Yes.
I'm a Jenkins, it's a long time I don't do Jenkins. If as ID you use the build ID will be 1, 2, 3, 4. It's an incremental number, but if I look at another pipeline, I will have the same build ID. So it means that the pipeline, the name of the pipe, should I put the name of the pipeline
Yeah, that's
into the
part of the
source
source.
or into the ID? And when I do the display, it starts to become complicated, etc. The example of pipeline is not good because we have an internal field with pipeline name, but when we look at service deploy, service upgrade, etc., what is the name? Is the name of I did it for a Kubernetes cluster? It is the name of the Kubernetes services. It is the name of the Kubernetes deployment. It is the name of the container inside the pod, inside the deployment. It is the name, etc.
Yeah. So here's my take. So I think we should still keep them separate because they're describing two different things. But the problem that you're describing is not the problem of source and ID. The problem that you're describing is because of how vague the definitions are within CD events. That's the issue. We need to be more opinionated on what source means. We need to be more opinionated on what ID. We need to be opinionated on all the fields and give clear examples and what is valid and what is invalid. And we don't do a good job of that today. So I think what we can do is we can create another overarching issue to describe, to mention, update the events and field to describe like what they actually mean in a very opinionated manner. That way, when people are reading this, it's very hard to get it wrong, right? Or if they provide something different, we could be like, hey, just look, we're very opinionated. This is what it means. You provided something different. So that's why it didn't work appropriately. So I think that's the bigger issue that you kind of captured. But yeah, I think, source and ID is just a side effect of that issue. So I think we should probably still keep them separate, but we can create another issue describing the issue of being, us being very vague with our definitions. Because you're absolutely right. Source, I think has very little definitions or even examples. Like I think the examples was like / like pipeline, so it's like very, very, very basic. So
often you have the same value of the context, but in reality we have it's maybe not clear in the description, I will let you, but ID and source is also used when we reference another subject. I mean, when I deploy a service, I reference the environment. But as source is optional, I could just say as the ID of the environment. But maybe without the source of the environment, I could not link maybe to the right environment if behind I would like, if another emitter you declares the same ID but a different source, but with a source, etc. And we have no consistency.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah,
also
we definitely,
why
yeah,
having URI like for package, for package, it's become clearer. When I have a package ID, I follow the PURL format. I have every information. I have the namespace, so I can expose or extract the information as I want. It's not an obscure ID, an opaque ID. It's an ID with information.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think you guys are right. It's like we need to be more opinionated about. I mean, and I've been asking for CD events to get opinionated for over a year now, to be really clear about what goes where in some of these and what's expected. And no, I agree. I don't think it's a matter of combining them. I think it's just a matter of being really clear how we expect this to work and what we're expecting to find in those fields.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll go ahead and create that separate issue. We're out of time, so I want to
Okay.
wrap this up and respect everyone's time. So yeah, David, I'll go ahead and create that issue. I'll ping you on it, and then if I didn't word or didn't phrase something correctly, please
Feel free
just
to comment on this issue also.
yeah, I will. Awesome. All right, cool. Well, thank you everyone. It was good seeing everybody, and then yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Bye.